Welcome back to another new episode of How Should I Introduce You? I'm Silas Grant. It's been a while, but we are back with another installment. And for those who are watching for the first time, this is an opportunity for me to give folks in my network the opportunity to meet one another in the event that they haven't met one another before. We've done a number of installments, and there have been a lot of people that have connected following these conversations. And this latest installment is a bit different. The two individuals that are sitting together in the same room already know each other. And they know each other because a couple of years ago, I made an introduction between the two of them. I felt that they needed to know one another. And for me, I take pride in being a connector. And I take so much pride in it that I do it a lot. And so much so that sometimes I forget that people were introduced to each other through me. And so two of my lifelong friends, I would say, are sitting next to each other in the same room 5 years after I've introduced them. And I'll tell you why we did this, and I'll tell you how this came about. But without any further ado, I want to introduce Delonte Gholston and Myron Long.
What's happening? What's happening, brother?
What's going on?
Good.
So you guys you're at Myron's house, right?
Yeah.
The kids are playing, the wives are talking.
Right upstairs, right?
Right. That's cool. That's cool.
Bumps, if you need anything, that's
right.
That's it. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. So as I mentioned, this is How Should I Introduce You? And these are two people that I introduced. And one of the things that I'm always, I guess, aware of is being alert and aware about how I introduce people. And a lot of us wear many hats. A lot of us play many roles. And in some situations, we take off those hats depending on where we are. All of that being said, with so many moving parts, I just want to be respectful of people when I introduce them. And so we're going to play a quick exercise game, right? And I want us to go through this just to kind of showcase to people how important it is to do the right thing when it comes to introducing people. So, Myron, if I were to introduce you, here's what I would say. And I want you to listen to what I would say and then tell me how you would kind of make, adjustments to that. So I would say that I've known you since high school. We went to high school together. We first really started like being friends in gym class and team sports. And from there, we would run into each other from time to time, and we both began to walk in our respective purposes. And what I've seen from you in the last 10 to 15 years is that you've been really, 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 really keened in on edifying young people, getting young people to feel empowered about themselves and to take command of their lives, specifically in the area of advocacy and social justice, so much so that you started a school that is aimed at giving students, children, the opportunity to learn how to advocate for themselves through the social justice school. Our daughters were also in daycare together, in summer camp together. And overall, man, like a really, really super cool dude. So, Myron, that's how I would introduce you. Maybe that would be altered a bit depending on the environment, but in general, that's how I would say, hey, this is Myron Long.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, Silas. I think I would also add in, like, we were living parallel lives at different universities with the same friends who overlapped in different circles. So while you was down at Hampton, I was up in Morgan. We had we had a couple other guys who were like in both of our circles. And I don't even know if we knew it at the time because we were both in college and then we came home, and I think there was still some overlapping of those different circles as well. So I would add that, like, right after high school and Coolidge, then came that college period, and then fast forward into who we are today.
Funny enough, I was with E earlier today. His son turned 1. So
Yeah.
From earlier today. So there are definitely a lot of overlap in that regard. Delonte Gholston, how I would introduce you is another former classmate that I went to junior high school with. We lost contact for a very long time, ended up in the same community meeting a few years back, talking about trying to quell violence. And you were there in your capacity as pastor of Peace Fellowship Church. I'm looking at this guy across the room and I'm like, I can't figure out where I know him from. Suddenly we have an opportunity to begin talking to each other and just kind of probing each other with respect to where do I know you from? And then it hit, wow, we went to Paul Junior High School together. From that point, we started to communicate in a professional capacity. And I had an opportunity to observe you spearhead a number of peace walks in the Ward 7 community, specifically in the Benning Road corridor. And I saw you boldly and courageously speak out in many situations where others would be quiet about gun violence, especially those that are in the faith-based community. And so I would also say that you've been at the forefront of the modern effort from the pulpit to be able to speak about gun violence in a way where it holds the church accountable for getting involved to be able to help quell that. So that's sort of how I would introduce you. So you let me know what I got right and what I should add.
No, that's it, man. That's it. That's it. To a T, man. To this day, it touches me, man, to know that first time we actually had a community meeting to talk about violence at our church, you were there, and you brought Councilman McDuffie with you. It was and I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, man, I know this guy. You know, where do I know this guy from? So it's a beautiful thing, man. Beautiful thing. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah. So around that time, I know that the both of you were getting off the ground your initiatives, you, Delonte, with coming in and filling in that role as a pastor at Peace Fellowship. Myron, you were getting the social justice school off the ground. And I can't recall all the specifics, but there was something that triggered me to say these two guys need to know one another. And that part I'm not really necessarily focused on with this question, but what was it, or what was the turning point after the introduction that caused the bond to be as strong as it is today?
Mm,
Mm.
mm. What's funny is I remember I met him at the Denny's over on Benning Road. You know what I'm saying? That was like the first time I've been to that Denny's. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm a joke on him a little bit. Typical pastor time. He was running a little late. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, brother, got me out here. I'm sitting at the table. You know what I'm saying? I ain't ordered nothing yet because I'm waiting for this brother to get here. You know what I'm saying? And so,
My life,
yeah.
my life.
I think when we met, it was just like a, I feel like it was just like a connection, because I feel like even though I went to Bacchus, and I didn't go to Paul, but I had like a lot of people who went to Paul. So I feel like I knew of Delonte in some shape or form or fashion, just didn't know him yet. And then, I think as we started to get to know one another, and, our children are around the same age, I feel like it just kind of naturally birthed into like an authentic relationship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. How about you, Delonte? What was it from your perspective, your vantage point?
I feel like the biggest thing for me that I feel like really brought me closest to Myron was when his mom got sick.
Yeah.
And that was when I don't know, something clicked, like really clicked. We were already kindred spirits from the same side of town, uptown dude, marrying a lady from North Carolina with the 5-year with kids.
I didn't think about that. Oh yeah, I didn't think about that.
That was already cemented in. But like just being able to walk with him in a pastoral way, something just clicked there. It definitely knit us together. It was a bond, and we were already like family, but we became family during that time.
In with respect to the three of us, right? So I've been involved in politics. I've been involved in community work. I would venture to say that if you were to ask people that went to Paul or Coolidge with me, would this sort of path make sense for me? I think back then they would have said yes, right? The three of us from DC, you two from Uptown, I'm from Northeast. Did you see yourselves in the respective roles that you're in? Like Delonte, I can't I can't really remember like specifically, but I could kind of see religion. I could kind of see pastor. I could kind of see some sort of role like that, right? Myron, thinking back at Coolidge, I don't know that I knew what you would do, but I definitely admired it because I think it's reassuring to me that the story of matriculation and maturity for our kids, right? It's like neither one of you totally fit into the role the way that people would traditionally see it, right?
Yeah.
Being a founder of the school, being a pastor of a church, but you guys are still down to earth, still cool, still like relatable. So I guess it's a two-part question. Like, how do you respond to being relatable despite the fact that reputations in those two spaces may not be that all the time? And then secondly, like, do you think that looking back, you always saw yourselves going to be able to be in these positions?
I mean, you just took me back to Lewis Jenkins, seventh grade. I had a conversation with him. I used to carry a Bible in my back. I used to carry a Bible in my back pocket when I was at Paul.
Okay.
And I would say I was the opposite of relatable in those years because I just was kind of fundamentalist in my faith in some ways.
Okay.
But I would say that the seeds of pastoral ministry were planted. I just had a lot of growing up to do. I had a lot of maturation to do. It's funny because at least for me, I experienced a radical reconnection with social justice when I was in seminary. That was what really, Mike Brown was killed when I was in seminary. Trayvon Martin was killed. Sandra Bland. That was all when I was studying, when I was in grad school. And I was still kind of like flirting with this like highly buttoned up image of myself and what a pastor would be. But everything broke during those years, like 2012, 2013, 2014 through 2016. Like if I had any notion or concept that I would be some button up, respectable, unapproachable pastor, all of that was shattered when I saw how pastors reacted on the ground during those years, because you just could not find, that was when, if you were on the street, if you were protesting, if you were organizing, it was very hard to find pastors that were just real and willing to be in the street, willing to not be judgmental of LGBTQ folks, willing to just be with young people, just like to be out there. They were so focused on, so many were so focused on trying to get people into a church or trying to get people to come to a program, but couldn't see how God was moving in the streets. And those years, they really, I don't know, it shifted me and changed like my whole trajectory, my whole understanding of who I was, who I wanted to be as a pastor. And so it just brought together like all the like, honestly, man, growing up in our city, I just compartmentalized so many things. I compartmentalized the shootings I had seen. I compartmentalized how I've been treated by cops. I really held on to this very like respectable image of myself, and all that just, there wasn't no more space for it, honestly, in my life. And so that was just a major shift. So if I am in any way down to earth, I still don't know how I am, honestly. I'm trying, you know what I'm saying? If I am in any way approachable, if I am in any way somebody who can be trusted by our community, it's because my heart has been broken by the plight of our people, man. I just want to be a conduit for healing and for growth and for justice and change, man. So that's it.
Yeah, yeah. You got some stuff I want to follow up on, but before I do that, I want Myron to chime in terms of his trajectory and how much of today he saw back in 95, 96, 97, that time period.
Yeah, so I think that my friends and the older brothers in the neighborhood, I feel like saw something in me that would be different. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like as much as there is this like conversation around toxic masculinity in our neighborhoods and for Black men, I would actually say that like my friend group, I was like able to just be like my authentic self. You know what I'm saying? Like, I grew up with, like J Man London, E. A bunch of my friends were like super sports, and I was always the like last brother picked when we played pickup ball. And it was cool, you know what I'm saying? And I remember very vaguely like all of the people in my neighborhood speaking some greatness in me. I remember working, I had my first job at the McDonald's up by Nativity, you know what I'm saying? They would joke and be like, you're gonna be like the Calvin, you know what I mean, from the Calvin commercials or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just remember like feeling like, I could be I could be smart, you know what I'm saying? I could just do my thing. And I knew that there was going to be some type of trajectory that was different from what was being offered at the time. And I felt like I didn't have any pressure to try to be an athlete, to try to be super masculine in the way in which we kind of see it today. And I really attribute that to like my friends. They just let me be myself. And so I feel like for me, I always say like I'm just a brother from uptown who happened to be blessed to found a school. You know what I'm saying? Like nothing more. I don't come from no high Ivy League networks. And that's why I think the work feels so real and compelling to me, because I feel like I see myself so much in my students that,
Yeah.
there's a connection that will always be there,
Yeah, it always feels like people come in from the outside and create what you've created for our kids, right? That's why I said earlier, I felt like the maturation and the matriculation that you went through growing up uptown and being able to, not only start a school, but really relatively closely to where you grew up, right?
Yeah.
And definitely across the street from where you went to junior high school.
Right.
That doesn't happen a lot. And you walk around and, the way you present yourself, kids look at you like, oh, he's one of us. Right. And I think that makes a world of a difference. And to go back a bit to what you said, Delonte, and let me be very truthful with you. You're probably one of the only pastors that I call by the first name, right? So not very different from me in that regard, but I'm almost prompted to be like Pastor Gholston, right, on a recording. But what you said was really important about a couple of things, like being, super convicted about your faith at an early age, and standing on that, but then also that moment of truth for you when you found yourself as one of a few or maybe the only in the streets. And I think back to that time and even generations past where our pastors, for what it's worth, they took the perspective of, maybe the guy shouldn't have put his hands down, or maybe the guy shouldn't have ran, or, the respectability politics piece, right? So here you are, a young man in seminary school. This is happening around you. Talk about the pressure that you may have faced from other people in your space, other ministers, other pastors, other spiritual leaders, with you blazing a trail that, quite honestly, before you came along, it wasn't necessarily as bright as it is now.
Yeah, I mean that was a challenging time because I mean just straight up, I mean Black Lives Matter was run primarily by Black women and by queer Black women, right? So when it was a very eye-opening for me because I had never been in those spaces outside of white spaces where I went to college. I went to Swarthmore College, so I went to a very progressive uh, liberal arts schools. I was accustomed to seeing white people and Black people being queer, being questioning, being really big on justice. But I definitely didn't see that in the church, and that was one of the things. That was one of the things that I had been trying to reconcile in my head, in the years following Swarthmore. And so because I didn't really have a good gauge for seeing that kind of passion about housing justice, environmental justice, military industrial complex, nonprofit industrial complex, I didn't see any of that in churches. And so naturally, when I saw our people out in the streets hurting, crying, his brother was killed in Pasadena, 2016, J.R. Thomas. And we knew like immediately we needed to be out in the streets. And so it was hard to be one of few clergy. I think the what was great about it for me is that I was in seminary at the time. I was a student, right? And so I didn't have no church like tying me down. I didn't have no other pastor telling me, oh, you can't do this, or you know, what would you think if your congregation thought this? None of that was there for me. And so the people that I rocked with at that time, we were all in seminary. We were all like in this very like transformational. We were there because we wanted to change. That's why we were there. So like, here's an opportunity. Like, don't miss this moment. And when I saw friends of mine from DC in Ferguson, Rahel Tesfamarian, one of my classmates at Banneker, she was in Ferguson. I was like, there is no way Rahel's gonna be in Ferguson, and I'm not at least gonna be on the streets in LA. I might not be able to make it down to Ferguson, right? Because I was poor as fuck. My car had been repossessed. I ain't gonna get into that. But I said I had to be faithful where I was at, and it was real. I remember pastors at prominent churches in LA that refused, because there was one sister, her name was Jasmine, queer activist, bold. I mean, prophetic sister, but because of her sexual orientation, they refused to allow her into the church, right? But she is literally leading the movement on the ground. And it was so clear to me, God is not in these buildings. I'm sorry. God is not with these denominations. God has moved. Like, there has been a shift and the power has moved to the streets. And so all I knew to do was to follow God to the streets. And so it was the natural thing for me coming back home. Yes, we'll have a Sunday service, but we have to be in the streets. Across the street from where our church is located, my man Olu was killed. Like, how could there not be a ministry that's relevant to Olu and his mother and his sister and his nieces and his nephews? How could there not be a ministry that's relevant to them, that's relevant to my family? My nephew was shot in the city. Like, how could church not be relevant to him? Right? So to my sister, to my father, who I found out was shot, we never even talked about it my whole life until my nephew got shot. So for me, like, since I've said yes to God in terms of following God into ministry, there's been no more of this, you one way at church on Sunday, you another way, you switch it up when you get on the 70, you another way when you go to work on Monday through Friday. That's how I was living my life in DC. And I mean, people that's watching this, I'm sure if you grew up in the city, you would understand. You learn how to be many different versions of yourself, just in the city. But it was heartbreak that just, it obliterated all of the boxes, and it was just like, no, man, I don't care. And the joy and the beauty of it is now pastors that lead these denominations, to God be the glory, now they're honoring me and giving me awards and trying to figure out how to follow the standard that by God's grace we've been able to set, because they want their churches to be alive and to have young people in them and to be relevant and to have the community supported. And we're nobody's anything. Myron can tell you, we're nobody's mega church. You know what I'm saying? We just trying to be for our people. And I feel like I don't have any other choice. I could not do ministry in any other way.
Yeah. So all of us went away from DC, and you brought us, in this conversation at least, back to what DC was looking like when you touched down. But Myron, talk about your return to DC and how that drove you in the space that you're in right now.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think, like, when I think about it, it wasn't necessarily the return to DC. I feel like I had not yet shed all of the impact of the different systems of inequalities that was impacting us when we were growing up. You know what I'm saying? And so I always talk about it like, we grew up in a time where really it's the, like, you could argue like the birth of mass incarceration. We all know that we've seen people you know, you see somebody in high school literally one day and then you might not see them for 20 years, you know what I'm saying? And we also grew up at a time with this like so-called war on drugs, you know what I mean? Where, you know, the jump outs was coming through the neighborhoods, unjustly locking folk up. And our schools were, you know, one could argue they might have been somewhat better, but it was still this like factory model of school where like the three of us, we could perform in school because we met the certain criterion of like what it meant to be a student. But I'm sure that we all have friends who like, if school was more progressive in a sense of it's not just a pencil to paper that would like you allow you to manifest your smart, how intelligent you are, your greatness. I'm sure that we both have friends who would both probably be here physically in the world, but even also be more successful. And I feel like for me, that was the impetus into getting into the field of education, but also why I felt like we needed a school that's not just about education itself, because we saw the forces of like an unjust education system, an unjust criminal justice system, and a war on drugs. And so for me, in order to eradicate that, it can't just be like great schools. You know what I mean? Like we got to have great schools that are really rooted in figuring out how to use what young people know in order to change the world. Because without that, like two-prong approach, we just have like, you know, a lot of great schools. And don't get me wrong, we need great schools, but we also need young people who see the purpose of knowledge not for like my own individual gain, but for me to give back into the community.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. I think I've always had my own little personal beef with the phrase, or the phrase and the concept of waiting for Superman, right? It's going to be somebody that, again, as I mentioned earlier, somebody coming in from the outside that has the answer. I think the answer is within, you know, what we have in our existing community, but it's a matter of us empowering people and really giving them that jolt to do the work.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's a good point, Silas, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think, to your point, like grew up in the 90s, went to school until 2003, came back, and then got into education in 2006, been on this journey for the last 20 years. When we started social justice school, I also had to do a little bit of self-check, right? Because the reality is that like I'm a Black man from DC, but my needs in the 90s and the 80s is drastically different from what kids need right now. And I didn't, to your point around like coming in the community, I didn't want to just assume like, oh, I'm a Black man from DC, I know what y'all need, let me go in here. So it was important for us when we designed the school to like really talk to people to see like, what do you actually need? What do you want in a school? Because I didn't want to just make this assumption that because I'm from DC, I automatically knew what those needs are because the needs are evolving over time. To your point, Silas, like we didn't want to be a school that come in and colonize communities because I'll be the first to say like there are schools that have come in and just like brought their mores and values and say, here go to school, and we have to be like these passive participants, and that's not justice.
Yeah. Can you walk me through a scenario where you heard from people what they needed, you didn't have that readily available in your toolbox, and you had to go get it?
Yeah, so I think the crazy part, Silas, and we say that we're a school that builds with the community and not for them. And the way we try to really do that is through what we call like empathy interviews, where we were trying to talk to people about, you know, tell me about your best experience you had in school. Tell me about your worst experience you had in school. What do you think school would look like in Wakanda? And we had to ask questions like that at the time when the first Black Panther came out, because it's hard to even imagine what school could look like because, you know, all we know is like the, you know, depending on how old a young person is, the 10, 15 years they've been in school. And I think what we heard from young people was that was consistent around like their best times when it was like real world experiences. Like every time we came back to and we saw that like hope and like glimmer from young people, it was always around like I was doing something that I felt connected to deeply and that was meaningful. But the times in which they felt like they weren't connected to school is when they saw themselves as just like a number. Like no one really knew who they were, didn't really know their parents, didn't know what their dreams and aspirations were. And so we really tried to bring those people's voices into the design of our school, which looked like for us, like we did a whole bunch of different pilots in the school in order to get feedback from students and families. And not just like, that kind of like pomp and circumstance feedback, like, I'm gonna send you a survey and then I'm gonna put that survey away. We actually literally combed through all of the surveys that we would send to families and make sure that we brought different elements in the community so we could truly be a community-based school.
Yeah, got it. I like that a lot. Delonte, for me, I have this note in my phone where I wrote down a bunch of people that I kind of gleaned from, and I've created this sort of hodgepodge um, formula for who I want to be in terms of my career and how I show up. Do you have a North Star? Is there a pastor or a minister or some sort of leader from times past or the current generation that you look at and you're like, you know what? Either this one person or these small group of people, that's sort of my North Star, and that's how I know or how I maintain the right direction, or I know I'm going in the right direction.
It's a good question. It's going to sound corny, but Dr. King is definitely a huge North Star for me. When I was 6, I was back in that, I mean, when we were 6, that was like the first year or the second year that the King holiday was actually a thing. And like there were all these oratorial contests all over the place. And my dad and my mom, they saw that I had a quick recall from singing and from church. And so they put me in these oratorical contests and had me memorizing all these Dr. King speeches because my dad had vinyls he would play. This is right around the time before he got saved. So he would play, he would play, Harry Melvin and the Blue Notes. He would play Sam Cooke. When he got saved, everything went out the window. All his records went out. All his liquor went out, But one of the things that I got hooked on was when he had a vinyl of King speeches. And I would play them Jones down in the basement. And I've always been musical, so a part of mimicking music is also mimicking voice. And so I would try to mimic Dr. King as best I could, and I memorized one of his speeches, and I would like go around the city and do it. And I did one at Israel Baptist Church in Northeast off 12th Street. And I felt God in that time. And my dad, actually, he's always been ahead of his time. He had this 6-year-old write an addendum to Dr. King's Drum Major Instinct speech, where he wrote into my little spiel that if Dr. King was alive today, he wouldn't be in the hills of Georgia. He would be on Georgia Avenue, Northwest. He wouldn't be in Alabama. He would be on Alabama Avenue, Southeast. He wouldn't be in Mississippi. He would be on Mississippi Avenue, Southeast. And this 6-year-old is saying these words, knowing the gravity, but not really knowing it. You know what I'm saying? I'm knowing what's happening all around me. I'm going to sleep hearing gunshots and ambulances every night. And so like in so many ways, like that's still my North Star. Like if Dr. King were alive today, where would he be? Right. And so he's a huge North Star for me. My dad is a huge North Star for me. He always told me, man, you cannot run from yourself. He always told me, he's like, you can go to LA. These individuals trying to go to PG. and he would be like, he always says that you can't run from yourself. He's a huge inspiration for me. My dad is a prophet, man. My dad and my mom right now are one of 3 Black families on our original block. Because when everybody else moved, he refused to move. When the church moved, he left the church. He went through a whole season of depression. My mom, my whole family, it was like a whole thing because we left our church because they decided to move to PG. And that is a huge reason why I am the way I am about my city. You know what I'm saying? It's because of him. To be totally honest, it really is because of him. Of course, there are others. This Reverend Floyd Flake he's in Harlem. He did some amazing work in terms of community development. Malcolm X is a huge. I mean, there's a lot of different people I could call, but my dad is the one that had me read autobiography of Malcolm X when I was 11. You know what I'm saying? He's the one that had me. So it would be him. And my mom is obviously the one that taught me how to pray. So yeah. She's the reason why he got saved, why I got saved. So that's all.
Yeah. So Myron, how about you? North Star.
Yeah, I would say there's 2 individuals. I think the first would definitely my mom. Peace be upon her. I think my mom showed me like what it meant to be a revolutionary in a quiet way. You know what I mean? Like my mom my family was actually originally from Southwest. We happened to move uptown because the church moved from Southwest to 14th Street. And my mom was she was the Black woman in the church who, she was the one that was always cooking on Sundays. You know what I mean? Always taking care of the babies, always in the choir. And I feel like she taught me this real, you don't have to be out in the forefront. People need, like, they need basic needs. They got to eat. Their children need to be taken care of so that they can, make sure they can be flourishing in their lives. But she was also like a fierce advocate. You know what I'm saying? Like when it was time to go to 10, she went to 10. You know what I'm saying? Like, she wasn't gonna play about her children. She wasn't gonna play about her church community as well. And I think the other, as I got older, would probably be Ella Baker. When I think about like her desire just to like cede power to young people and to, unjustly be put out of the way during the movement because it had so much patriarchy, but then to still find so much glory and power in creating freedom schools that essentially gave, like, we hope and pray to see ourselves as a continuation of that freedom school model of like literacy and social advocacy and activism as well. So I think those would be my two
The guy right here, man. It's the dude right here.
Yeah,
man.
I was gonna say that's admirable because in the education space, but also in the faith-based space, there are a lot of barriers and veils for women. So yeah, your North Star examples of, obviously your mom, that makes sense, but to go to Ella Baker as, another potential North Star, and for that reason, because that she had to overcome the patriarchy, and that's definitely admirable.
Thank you, brother.
I've known the both of you for a very long time, and I see the two of you stand really strong on what you believe. And no matter what the environment, I always see the both of you in the same disposition, right? Just ready to serve, ready to help, smile on your face, just eager to be able to get involved and do whatever is necessary for everybody else, right? What do you all do as means of trying to recharge yourself? And I mean, in particular, you, Delonte, you the kind of brother, it's like you telling everybody, if you need a hug, I can give you a hug. If you need, I'll give you prayer right now. Like, but it has to be a time when you like, man, I'm sick of everybody. I want to throw this phone. I don't want to hug people. I don't want to shake everybody's hand. I don't want to lock the keys to this church. I mean, the doors to this church 4 hours after we did the benediction. Like, how do you guys recharge?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's been a journey. It's been a real journey. Like, I feel like it's always, you always on, and you always gotta, when you wear so many hats, you got your passion job, your passion life. You also got this other great passionate job called fatherhood and husbandhood that's difficult. And I feel like I've been trying to find different ways to, take care of myself. And I ain't gonna hold you, Silas. Like, I actually, when you started to get um on your fitness movement and wellness movement and making that um public to people, it was a huge source of inspiration. Like, I will be forever grateful for just seeing you go through this transformation. And I feel like, I'm not a gym rat. I feel like it took me a while to like find my thing, and it to be okay to be my thing. And I think, during the pandemic, you got a lot of extra time on your hands because you don't have to like physically be in the office space. And for me, running just became my thing. It's the thing that, like, when the days are hard and the nights are long, I just feel so rejuvenated in order to be able to run. And I think even that came through some evolution. You know what I'm saying? Like, my therapist pushed me to say, like, this isn't about exercise. It's not another task that you have to do. Like, this is actually your self-care. And that was the moment where it was like, oh, I'm getting all these miles posted on social media and all that. But it's actually about, like, that's just me taking care of myself. You know what I'm saying? And I think, like, that is the thing that, I try to do as much as I can in order to really like refuel. Cause, life be life, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny because like when I see you a lot, we run into each other. You know, either I'm walking or I'm on the bike, and somewhere North Capitol, Fort Todd, and I'm always running into you. And the funniest thing is, I've never said this to you, but I always keep it short with you because I know you in that moment. That's like I say to myself, he in his jam right now. Like I'm gonna say what's up, but I'm not even gonna stop my walk or my pedal. Like I'm just gonna, let him know I see him. But I know how valuable that time is because I know what it's done for me.
Sure.
Right? And when I saw you dedicate yourself to it, I was definitely happy about that. But again, I know that that's a moment that it's not about exercise or getting in shape. It's like it's this thing that really recharges you.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I remember one time it was dumb early. It was like 6 in the morning. You was coming down at the top of the hill at Fort Totten, and I was like running up. And like you said, we both could tell it was like we were in the mix in the zone, but I also felt even though we didn't say much, we actually literally just passed each other. I also felt really seen and connected in that moment because I knew
Yeah. I can say
brother
the same. Yeah.
on the same journey, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's real. That's real.
Yeah. How about you, Delonte?
That's another area actually that we connected on that cemented our friendship when I learned that Myron was also into running because I started a running club when I was when I was at Fuller Seminary. I used to run with a club here in DC, Capitol Running Club. I trained for the Marine Corps Marathon, and running has been a real source of connection for me. I'm an extrovert, and so I love running with people and talking and getting to know people of different backgrounds. And so that's been another area. It's definitely one of the ways that I have learned to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And regular sabbaticals, is another way. Every Monday, people in the church, they know, don't call me, don't text me. I'm fully off. In fact, I'm on sabbatical right now. I'm at my friend's house. I got a little something I'm sipping on the floor right now. This is not a church visit. This is
Yeah. That hat got on right now.
So in fact, the next 2 years I'm taking I did apply for a fellowship, a grant, where I'll be doing some travel, be going to West Africa, going to East Africa, doing some theological studies, some cultural studies, connecting to my mom's side of the family, our Gullah Geechee roots. So I one of my pastors in seminary, he really was the first pastor I'd ever seen that took an actual sabbatical, took 4 months away from the church. I never heard of that. I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know you could apply and get a grant and do that. And so it was a real model to me. Had I not seen that, I don't know who I would be, to be honest with you. Had I not seen him take a day each week off to be with his family, and I not seen him take retreats on the weekends. I just didn't grow up seeing that. Black men don't do that. Period.
And specifically, like in the role of a pastor, it wasn't until I was close to my 40s that I even realized pastors could or did retire. Right? I just thought they just died as pastors, right?
You just died.
My wife, because I grew up in church. I grew up in the same church as her, and I was like, "Pastors can retire." She was like, "Yeah, they can."
Yeah, so
Hey, what's up?
Hey, Silas.
Hey, Dallas.
This is Molly's dad.
Hi. You good? Yeah. That reminds me, Delonte, the day I was riding my bike and I got my chain popped and I happened to run into you.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you publicly for that because you had the kids, you had the car seat. We broke the bike down, put it in the back. You held the bike for like, what, a day or two? I came and got it like 2 days later. So this funny thing is, we all in on it?
Yes, sir.
That's it. That's it.
Let's talk about. Oh, wait a minute. I think Molly coming in here. Molly, come here. Uh-oh, you got that.
Hey, Molly.
Hey, Molly.
Hold up. I gotta, you sit in the chair. I gotta cut the light back on, okay? All right, hold on. Oh, can you plug it back up? Hold on. Let's see. Oh man, we having a family jam now.
Right.
Hey, knock the light out. Come on. You
You
know who that is? Oh, but no, let's talk about family a bit, right? Because early on in this conversation, and I don't even know if we talked about this on the recording or before we started, but the thing that hit me when we first logged in to do the recording was that you guys are at Myron's house and your kids are playing together. And I mean, I'm just honored to know that your kids are going to grow up together and do great things. And it's going to be in part, I guess, because of the introduction I made, right? So that's like, that means the world to me, like more than y'all would ever know.
That's real.
Man.
That's real.
You're a blessing, man. You're a blessing, man. You are on your assignment, brother. You
Oh,
have
yeah.
eyes to see.
Appreciate that.
You have eyes to see, man.
Yeah. Let's talk about the DC or maybe even the world that you guys want to see for them. Like, what does that look like? You know what I mean? Like, how do you want to purposely do your part and contribute to shape what you want their world to be?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I feel like that's like, it's always a struggle, man. I think I want to make sure that I'm not trying to like live vicariously through them, and I'll be having to like check myself, you know what I'm saying, to make sure that they have their own identities and their own selves. But I think the world that I want them to live in is a world where they can just take up space. You know what I mean? Like I want them to be loud, not in an obnoxious kind of way, but just in a way in which like they are going to speak their truth and show up and be their authentic selves, like regardless of where they want to be. And I try to model that very intentionally, not only in the work but even as a father. Like when I go to board meetings, I'm talking to funders, like I'm gonna have a hat on, I mean, to the point where like the kids at school and at home, they be like, where your head at? You know what I'm saying? And it's like,
and look, you keep them fresh shoes on too.
Yeah,
you do. Always.
Yes, I just thank you, bro. I just want them to be, to be seen and to be heard, and just be able to be, the reality is that like I'm sure we all can relate to this, trying to raise like free Black children, you know what I'm saying, and trying to like, undo the like, kind of be and I believe me, I mean, I can speak to my mom particularly, like I know she did what she felt she needed to do in order for me to survive and thrive. And also I want our children, because we all know each other's children and wives, just to be really free to be who they are, and they can flourish in the world,
Yeah. How about you, Delonte?
I don't know, man. The only way I can answer that question is that they feel loved,
Yeah.
that they feel totally loved. On the ride over to Mount Alicia's house, we would listen to this song from the 90s by Alita Adams. It says, love begins at home. And it's such a powerful message. I won't go through all the lyrics, but it basically says, mother, father, sisters, brothers, careful how you treat each other. Children just repeat what they've been shown. Remember, we will reap what we have sown. Love begins at home.
Yeah, that's perfect.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I just looked at Claire and Emma, we just kind of held hands for a minute and just was like, God, help us to make that true. Regardless of what I do and who I organize for. I mean, that's one of the primary reasons why I came back. I was in LA saying other people's children's names when they were killed by law enforcement. And I was visiting one Christmas, and my nephew, same nephew that ended up getting shot about 4 years later, and this stays with me. he was like, Unc, and they call me DJ. He's like, Uncle DJ, man, I need a mentor. And I was like, okay, let me call my friend over Upward Bound real quick. Let me make a couple calls. You know, I'm being my DC self.
Right.
And he was like, nah, Unc, I need you. And when this church called me, man, to even consider to pray about taking this role, that's what was ringing in my head. It just starts at home, just period. Like just period. Like if I can't make an impact on my own nephew, if on my own daughter, my 5 about to be 6-year-old daughter in 2 weeks, my 3-year-old, like if they see me always, to your point about self-care, if they see me always snapping, stressed out, like taking care of everybody else's family, but not taking care of them, I failed.
And that happens a lot with PKs too, bro.
A
lot of preachers' kids, that happens to them. So I'm glad that you're conscious of that on the front end, so that you have that balance.
I'm trying, man. I'm not gonna sit up here and tell you that I'm perfect by any stretch. But I am trying, you know, to lean into love. And I'm realizing that it really starts with me. It really does start with me. I have to love me, accept me, embrace me, give myself space, give myself rest, take care of me. Because as long as I'm good, my interactions with Claire are going to be good. My interactions with my daughters are going to be good. And that's really one of the reasons why I am learning how to really take sabbatical, rest, renewal, so serious, man, so serious. So you know, y'all just pray for me, work in progress. But that's it, man.
Ain't we all?
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't at least give an opportunity to have a quick some quick feedback from you guys around what's happening right now in DC as it relates to crime and violence. There are people, it's funny, I've not heard people talk about what's the church going to do. I've not really heard people talk about what the schools are going to do. We hear a lot about the parents, we hear a lot about the city council, the mayor. But what do you, first of all, what do you think personally about what's happening? And then secondly, what do you think the schools and the faith-based community should be doing or could be doing to get involved to help out?
We failed. The church is, it could not be more clear and evident that the institution that is called the Black church has fundamentally failed. We have relocated outside the city. We have invested in an American dream myth that takes care of us, our children, our picket fence, our 2 dogs, or whatever the case, our 401k. It is clear that we no longer have any kind of connection really to youth, period. Walk into the average church right now in DC, it's going to be hard to find it full of youth, full of kids. So there's a fundamental disconnection, particularly kids that are growing up in projects, in difficult situations, in poverty. You're not going to find those kids in church. And so my vision in terms of what the church needs to do, I've been talking about in terms of build the ark. We have to be serious about being present in our community. We have to be serious about prevention. We have to be serious about intervention. We have to be serious about taking care of survivors of gun violence. We're making sure they have the treatment that they need, the services that they need, the care they need. We have to be serious about police accountability and engagement. We got to be serious about prayer, which is the fundamental work of any religious community, faith community. There are just some basic things. We have to be in schools. We have to be in hospitals doing hospital-based intervention. As soon as somebody gets shot, people of faith need to be there. And so from my perspective, there is a wide open lane for a church community, be it a masjid, be it a traditional Baptist church, a Pentecostal church, a synagogue, whatever the case may be, for the church to really take a role. This omnibus bill that we saw passed last week is just it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, but it's not surprising. And I'm no longer looking, quite frankly, to the city to be the solution to address violence in my city. I'm not looking to the mayor, I'm not looking to the city council. To the extent that there are leaders there, I'm certainly grateful. I will eternally be grateful for your time when you were at Kenny McDuffie's office, because he is one of the few leaders in our council that actually gets this issue and that leads on it. I'll always be grateful for him and a few others. But what I will say is that it's time for people of faith and people who still live in the city, who still vote in the city, who still pay taxes in the city, who still own homes in the city, who still have children and grandchildren in their city, to step into the streets, to get out of the four walls of the church, and to figure out how to wrap around schools. Like right now, we just put together a buffet of services for the school where we worship. I did. We brought in Alliance to Concerned Men. We brought in Guns Down Friday. We brought in representation from the bottom. We brought in community show. We brought in an array of services. Howard University, School for Center for Public Health, Dr. Mitchell's office, to make sure that at least we are trying to figure out. And if we find ourselves to be successful there, who knows? Maybe we can talk to Myron and figure out we can do something, because we've been able to be there for him as well. When he had an incident where a shooting took place at his school, we're able to make sure that family got care, the mom got care. And so it's up to us. It's on us at this point. There's no Calvary. You know what I'm saying? There's no special Negro. There's no, as you said, what was it? There's no Superman.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, that we're waiting for. It's us. It's time for us to put on our cape, you know what I'm saying, and just go to work and try our best, I guess, take care of ourselves in the meantime.
That's it. That's it. How about you, Myron? Education, schools, how do they get involved?
Yeah, I think that we aspire to be a school that has like a whole family, whole child approach to teaching and learning. And while starting in a pandemic was extremely difficult, it actually cemented that that's the kind of school that our families need. And so during the pandemic, we would, send families meals. We would send them transportation if they needed it to be able to get to and from work. And I feel like what we need to be reminded is that, like, the school is an institution within the community, but it should be the epicenter, to your point, that should be able to connect families to different resources, to make sure that they have what they need in order to survive. It's like, I know that schools have multi-million-dollar budgets, but if you're not employing your families with some of that multi-million-dollar budget, then how can we actually say that we're trying to really interrupt these systems? And it's beyond, the pomp and circumstance of just having like the Black Lives Matter shirt with your school logo on it. It's about, like, you have to be out in the community with them and understanding what those needs are and being able to make those connections, particularly around young people having access to just some form of income. Like, we really believe, and this is all from our kids, that like we can get out of poverty if folks just have more income. And so we really want to figure out how to way to make sure that schools see themselves as an educational institution, but a social institution as the foundation. And I think that's a pathway we can move forward.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I thank you both for making yourselves available to have this conversation. And this is a crystal clear example of what happens when people open their mouths and talk to each other, and relationships are built as a result, long-lasting, generational, crossing relationships. So my prayer is that the both of you are girded up and protected in the work that you guys are doing, and that your families are that much better as a result of your work, that your children and your wives can walk in this city and go anywhere and be recognized and given favor because of the investment you guys are making in other people. So
Appreciate you, man.
That's a word. Thank you, bro.
You did it, man. You did it, man. I thank God that you were willing to be a vessel, man. Truly. Thank you, man. Thank you, Silas.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, brother.
I thank you guys, man. When I see the both of you, either together or, individually, I'm just always inspired, and it kind of puts a pep in my step, no pun intended, right? Yeah, but for those that are watching, again, this is sort of out of the ordinary. These two guys already know each other, and they're off to the races in terms of doing the work, but also off to the races in terms of building their relationship. And for me, I use this as an opportunity to contribute and to serve people and to serve as an example. We've got to build our networks. We've got to build our tribes, and not just introduce ourselves to each other, but get to know each other and figure out how we can work together. So for those that are watching, my prayer is that you do the same thing in your networks. And if we all do that, I think we'll be a stronger community and a stronger world. So with that, until the next time, you guys take care, like and subscribe to the page, and we'll see you guys soon.